The first time I noticed it, the trees behind our house weren't moving with the wind. The palms swayed near the shoreline, the bamboo groves clacked along the footpath, but the cluster just behind our nipa hut stood perfectly still, as if something heavy had settled among them, watching, waiting. It was late October, 1954, in a tiny fishing village tucked against the southern coast of Luzon, where the sea woke you and the jungle swallowed your dreams. My wife, Lyra, had just given birth to our son in the same wooden room she had grown up in, beneath a crucifix darkened by time. There were no hospitals here, no doctors, only midwives and old prayers whispered into coconut oil. Her labor stretched through the night, accompanied by the cries of cicadas and the strange, low murmur of waves that never seemed to touch the shore. After the baby came, something in the village changed. People stopped passing by our house after sundown. The old women who used to bring rice cakes and herbs now left them on the bamboo steps without knocking. Even the dogs, usually bold and starved, kept a wide berth. I tried to laugh it off, blaming superstition, maybe the stress of becoming a father. But then I started hearing it too. At first it was just footsteps along the bamboo fence. Soft, deliberate, always stopping when I looked out. Then came the scratching, faint, like fingernails on wood, just beneath the floorboards where my son slept in a woven basket. One night, I pressed my ear to the ground and heard what I can only describe as breathing. Slow, shallow, and not at all human. Lyra said nothing, but her eyes were darker every day, as if sleep no longer visited her. She tied an anting around the baby's neck, a charm her grandmother had sewn into banana leaf. "Don't throw it away," she warned me once, without looking up. "Even if it smells rotten." By the third week, I stopped fishing. The sea no longer felt safe, not because of storms or swells, but because of what I saw one morning as I pushed our boat into the shallows. A figure, thin, hunched, with long black hair, standing knee-deep in the surf, its face obscured, hands hanging like broken branches. It didn't move as I approached. It only stared with two glowing red points where its eyes should have been. I backed away slowly, never turning my back. When I looked again, it was gone. But the water around it still rippled as if something massive had slipped beneath. They say witches, Mankukalam, sometimes come in the form of women, hovering just above the ground at night. I didn't believe that. Until I woke one night to the sound of whispering just outside our window. The hut was raised 5 feet off the ground, yet when I peeked through the woven bamboo slats, I saw a shadow drifting inches from the windowpane, hair swaying unnaturally slow, as if underwater. The second twist came the morning after. I found tiny footprints circling the base of our mango tree. Too small for an adult, too wide for a child. Lyra's mother, a quiet woman with cloudy eyes, stared at the marks and whispered, "Dewend. The little forest men. Tricksters. Some say they bless your crops, others say they steal infants for sport." I tried brushing the prints away, but the soil resisted like dry skin. I began to suspect our land was cursed, not by a spell, but by inheritance. The villagers whispered of a man who once lived on our plot, a healer who grew too powerful, too prideful. They said he angered something ancient that lived in the trees, something with teeth like fish hooks and eyes that turned men inside out in their sleep. Lyra had never told me this. I don't think she knew. But the land knew. And it hadn't forgotten. The final twist came during the town's feast day, when a traveling priest arrived for blessings. As he raised his hand to make the sign of the cross over our child, the baby screamed, not cried, screamed, as if his skin had turned to fire. The priest's eyes widened. He asked to speak to me alone. He told me our son bore the mark, a thin red slit beneath his left foot shaped like an eye. "Not evil," the priest whispered, "but watched. Marked for something." That night, I burned the anting. I didn't know why. Maybe out of panic. Maybe to test the truth. But afterward, the scratching returned, louder, more urgent. The forest behind our house rustled though the wind had died. I watched from the doorway as the trees parted, not broken or swayed, but gently pushed aside, and something stepped out. I won't describe it. Some things are not meant to be remembered fully. Now, years later, I live alone in a cement home far from the coast, but I still dream of those trees. Sometimes I wake and smell salt in the air, even though the ocean is miles away. I know what I saw, what I lived, what watched us. It never left. It waits. Not for me, but for him, my son, to come home. The first time I heard her voice, it wasn't a scream or a whisper, it was a song. It floated through the pine-choked silence like smoke, ancient and impossible, and too melodic to belong to anything human. I was camping alone near the base of Ashwood Ridge, where the trails thinned out and the cell signal died for good. The sun had just dropped behind the western edge of the mountain, and the trees swayed in an oddly rhythmic way, almost like they were keeping time with her voice. I remember freezing with 1 foot outside my tent, firewood under my arm, and just standing there, listening. It wasn't that the voice was loud. It was that it shouldn't have been there at all. There were no people for miles, just rocks, trees, wind, and me. But still, it came again, low and soft, not words exactly, just a kind of melodic, echoing cadence that made my stomach twist in a way I didn't understand. I tried to convince myself it was wind moving through the trees, or a bird call distorted by the cliffs. But it felt wrong in my bones, like hearing a nursery rhyme in a graveyard. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my tent staring at the ceiling, the sound gone but echoing inside me anyway. What scared me more than the voice itself was what it stirred. Memories I hadn't thought of in years. Memories I couldn't remember clearly. My grandmother used to hum to herself in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. The melody was similar. Not exact. But close enough that my chest tightened with something like grief. Or dread. When I got back home, I didn't tell anyone about it at first. Not until I was sitting in my friend Jason's garage with a beer in my hand and the smell of wet concrete in the air. I brought it up like a joke, like, "Hey, you ever hear a woman singing in the woods?" Expecting a laugh or a shrug. But Jason didn't laugh. He stared at me, blinked slowly, and said, "You heard it too?" I thought he was messing with me. I said, "What do you mean too?" He told me about something that happened to him last year, hiking alone up the same ridge. Said he made camp near a clearing he'd found just off the map, one of those places you don't mean to find, but once you're in it, you can't shake the feeling you weren't supposed to be there. He said he woke up just after midnight, unable to move, completely locked in his body while something outside the tent hummed a tune, slow and delicate, like it was inviting him. He told me his eyes rolled back, his jaw locked, and his limbs started twitching like he was having a seizure, but he could hear everything clearly, the wind, the crickets, the song. Then, just as suddenly, it all went quiet. No wind. No night sounds. Not even his own breathing. Just silence. He blacked out. When he woke up, he was outside his tent, barefoot and bleeding from his ears. I didn't want to believe him. I really didn't. But I saw the scar behind his left ear. And the thing is, Jason's not a guy who makes things up. If anything, he underplays everything. That should have been enough to keep me away. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not the voice. Not the melody. Not the dream I had afterward, where I was standing in the middle of a forest that didn't look like Ashwood Ridge, but felt like it. I was watching someone move between the trees. A woman. Long hair that hovered instead of swayed. She never looked at me. She just kept walking away, deeper into the woods, humming that same melody. 3 weeks later, I went back. This time, I didn't tell anyone. I just packed light, left early, and took the old fire road instead of the main trail. There was no reception by the time I hit the base, and I didn't care. I wasn't trying to document anything. I just wanted to understand. I made it to the ridge by dusk. The clearing Jason described was real, and it looked untouched. No trash, no footprints, no sign anyone had been there in years. That's when I heard it again. The voice. Clearer this time. Closer. Melodic, slow, female, but not young. It sounded ancient, like a lullaby carved into stone. And then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Small things scattered across the forest floor. Trinkets. A broken watch. A cracked compass. A child's shoe, almost fossilized with moss. Offerings. Or maybe, trophies. I backed away. I didn't run. I knew better than to run. But every step I took made the voice grow louder, like I was pulling it with me. I walked until my legs burned and only stopped when I hit a fork in the trail I didn't remember passing before. That's when I heard someone else's footsteps behind me. But when I turned, no one was there. The second twist came after I made it back to the car, hours later, shivering and wild-eyed. I unlocked my phone and checked my voicemail, just out of instinct. I hadn't had service in days, but somehow there was a new message. No caller ID. Just static at first. Then that voice. Humming. Faint and melodic. And layered under it, my own voice whispering. She's not calling to you, she's calling you back. I never said those words. Not once. Not to anyone. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've started hearing her hum in places I shouldn't. Grocery store aisles. The hallway outside my apartment. My dreams are getting stranger, always a forest, always walking deeper in. And I'm starting to remember more things I never remembered forgetting. Like the way my grandmother used to hum that tune right before she died. Or the time I woke up in the woods as a child with no idea how I got there. Here's the truth I can't ignore anymore. I don't think that voice is trying to scare people. I think it's luring them. Pulling them deeper, whispering in their sleep, erasing the map behind them. I think it waits for people who are already broken in small, invisible ways. People like me. People who will follow the song without asking why. The worst part? I can't remember what her face looks like. But I know, without a doubt, she's getting closer. And the next time I hear her, I don't think I'll want to leave. I was a Marine when I saw them, and I've never felt like myself since. It was supposed to be a standard nighttime navigation exercise. Map, compass, no GPS. A low-stakes op designed to sharpen our skills in the dark. The kind of thing we did a dozen times at different training sites. But this one was different. We were somewhere in northern Pennsylvania, deep in a government-owned stretch of woods used occasionally for ops like this. The name of the forest wasn't printed on our maps, and our CO just called it Sector 17. That should have tipped me off. I was moving between checkpoints, separated from my fire team after we took slightly different bearings to sweep a wider area. No big deal, we'd regroup by midnight. The terrain was thick, damp, and quiet in that way forests get when even the crickets know better than to make noise. My boots crunched through patches of frost, and every so often I'd catch the distant, faint echo of another Marine's gear jangling, then nothing again. Like the woods swallowed sound. Then I saw them. 3 soldiers standing completely still in a clearing between the trees, just silhouettes at first, dark against the faint orange haze of the night sky. I called out, assuming they were part of another squad. No answer. I stepped closer, maybe 30 yards out. Something was wrong. They weren't holding their rifles. They were cradling them, like how you'd hold a sleeping child. They weren't facing me exactly, just turned slightly, heads tilted, like they were listening to something far off. Not one of them blinked. They didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't react to me at all. It felt like I was looking at mannequins made to resemble soldiers, too perfect and too still, except their gear was modern, correct, down to the patches and mud on their boots. But their faces, pale, waxy, drained of life, were just off. As if whatever was behind their eyes wasn't human. I raised my flashlight and the beam cut through the mist. The moment the light touched them, all three heads snapped in my direction. No transition, no in-between, just still, then facing me, eyes locked. I turned and ran. When I finally found my way back to camp, gasping and soaked in sweat, I told the CO what happened. He stared at me for a few seconds, then said, "You were the only one assigned to that grid." I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. According to the roster and the navigation brief, no other squad had been anywhere near that area. That night, sitting around the low fire with a few of the other guys, I mentioned it, casually, trying to gauge their reactions without sounding like I'd cracked. One of the older sergeants, a guy who'd done tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, slowly looked up from his cup and said, "You saw them too?" That shut everyone up. He said the forest had a history. Whispers going back decades, strange figures spotted on night ops, always three. Always silent. No footprints. No names. Some thought it was just a psychological trick, sleep deprivation, shadow figures, shared hallucinations. But others believed it went deeper. That they were remnants. Not ghosts exactly, not spirits either. Just echoes of something long dead but not yet done. I tried to shake it off. Chalked it up to nerves, stress, isolation. I even requested to rotate to a different post the following week. But something followed me. I started catching glimpses of those same three figures. At first, just in reflections, a window, a mirror, a puddle. They'd be standing far behind me, motionless, always watching. Then came the dreams, always the same. I'm walking through that forest again. Only this time I'm the one standing still while something else moves around me, whispering in a voice I can't understand. The worst part? It didn't stop in my sleep. A few days after I got home from training, I saw them in the tree line across from my apartment. Just standing there staring. Middle of the day. Bright sunlight. I blinked, and they were gone. But I knew, deep in my bones, they hadn't left. The first twist came when I finally called one of the guys from my old unit, McKenna, who'd been stationed near Sector 17 for a different exercise months before mine. Before I could even describe what I saw, he said, "Let me guess, 3 soldiers, no faces, no voices." When I told him they had faces, he went quiet. Then he muttered, "Then they've changed." I pressed him for more, and he finally broke, said that when he saw them, their faces were blurred, almost censored, like a corrupted image file. He never told command. But he did start keeping a loaded rifle by his bed. The second twist came from a classified file I shouldn't have seen. I found it on a USB drive mistakenly left in a supply crate, marked Training Debrief 17 to 43. Inside was a report about a failed military experiment, psychological warfare, using projection-induced human surrogates. Basically, the military had tried to use experimental tech to implant false imagery into enemy minds. The experiment failed catastrophically. Test subjects began seeing figures outside the lab. Even after the tech was destroyed, they reported recurring hallucinations, paranoia, and eventual psychotic breaks. The kicker? The case study ended with a description. Triad projection, 3 humanoid apparitions. Static posture. No audio response. Persistent recurrence post-exposure. I wasn't supposed to see that. But I did. And now I can't unsee them. They're still here. Watching. Every day. I see them in crowds, in reflections, sometimes just beyond the reach of light. They never speak. Never move. Just stand there, like they're waiting for something, or someone. And I've started doing it too. Standing still for hours without realizing. Holding my breath. Listening to a silence that feels deeper than anything I've known. I think I'm becoming one of them. The first thing we saw were the faces, pale, glowing, and small, hovering just above the waterline across the lake, like reflections that didn't belong to anything. We thought they were lights at first, maybe from someone's cabin, but there weren't any cabins. Just woods. Miles and miles of woods. Micah was the first to notice them, pointing without saying anything, his finger trembling like a tuning fork. I followed his gaze and counted them, not quickly, but slowly, because they weren't blinking or moving. Just staring. Dozens of them, all childlike, eyes too wide, too still. They didn't flicker like flames or sway like flashlights. They just existed, half hidden behind the tree trunks. I remember the way the moonlight skimmed over the lake's surface, just enough to catch the faint outlines of their faces, as if they were watching through glass. Then they vanished, all at once, as though they'd never been there at all. It wasn't until the sound started that I knew something was wrong. Soft rustling, from across the water. Then twigs snapping, footsteps circling the shoreline. It wasn't wind. It was purposeful, rhythmic. Something moving with intent. We were trapped. Micah and I had camped by a rusty, padlocked gate earlier that evening. It marked the only road back out, some kind of abandoned access road no one seemed to use anymore. We joked about it, laughed at how, deliverance, it felt. He said something about how this place probably hadn't seen another person in a decade. I guess we thought that made us brave. We were idiots. I grabbed the keys and sprinted up the hill toward the gate, flashlights swinging wildly. My lungs were heaving before I even got to the top. But when I reached it, the lock was gone. Just gone. In its place was a thick chain looped around the bars, the links fused together with what looked like melted metal. The kind of heat you need a blowtorch for. Micah swore it had been a regular padlock when we arrived. I even remembered him fiddling with it, half joking about how it wouldn't keep anything out. And now it felt like something wanted to keep us in. We tried calling for help. Phones wouldn't work. No bars, no signal. Just the looping emergency alert sound when you try to make a call. The kind that chills your blood because it's not just silence, it's denial. Back at the campsite, we built the fire higher than before, feeding it with everything we had. We didn't talk much. Every now and then, we'd both turn to look across the lake again. Nothing. No faces. No movement. But we heard them. Crunching leaves. Breathing. The slow suck of wet earth as something walked closer. We started seeing small things, too. Things that didn't make sense. A child's shoe half buried in moss. A doll's hand sticking out of the mud near our tent. At first, I thought Micah had brought it as a prank. He was the kind of guy who loved a good scare. But the way his voice cracked when he swore it wasn't him, that's when I started to believe we weren't alone. The first twist came just before dawn. I was standing near the edge of the lake, watching the fog rise like breath from the water's mouth, when I realized I couldn't see Micah anymore. I called out. No answer. My voice echoed and died. I found him standing perfectly still by the tree line, his back to me, his flashlight lying dead on the ground behind him. I touched his shoulder. Cold. Clammy. When he finally turned, he looked wrong. Like he was awake, but something behind his eyes wasn't. He smiled, a slow, uncanny stretch of the lips, and whispered, "They just wanted someone to notice." That was the second twist. Because as he said it, I saw the faces again. But this time, they weren't across the lake. They were behind me. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Nestled in the trees, peeking from under roots, suspended from the branches like lanterns. No bodies. Just faces. Watching. Waiting. I ran. I don't know how long I was in the woods. Time stretches when you're in that kind of fear, the kind where your own breath becomes a threat. When I finally stopped running, I was alone. No firelight, no Micah, no trail. Just endless dark trees that all looked the same. I collapsed near a fallen log, pressing my hands over my ears because the sounds were getting louder, not just footsteps now, but voices. High-pitched, hollow laughter. Whispers in strange, sing-song cadence. Some of them were calling my name. And that's when I realized the final, most disturbing part. It wasn't that we'd seen them, it was that they'd seen us. By acknowledging them, by looking too long, we'd become part of whatever they were. Like we'd fed something that had been starving in the dark for so long. I kept thinking back to Micah's voice, that vacant smile, the way he said, "They just wanted someone to notice." I noticed. And now, every time I close my eyes I see those faces, flickering behind eyelids like afterimages from a flashbulb. They're with me even in daylight. Reflected in puddles, windows, screens. Always smiling. Always waiting. I made it out, eventually. Or at least I think I did. I found the road. Someone picked me up. But Micah was never found. The authorities said it was a case of exposure, maybe disorientation. They said people get lost in the woods all the time. But I know better. I sleep with all the lights on now. I never camp. I never go near lakes. Because once you see them, truly see them, they don't let you go. They follow you. And worse, they wait. Because sooner or later, someone else will notice. I always thought it was strange how quiet the forest got in winter, like the cold pulled a blanket over every living thing, muffling the world into silence. I remember that particular night vividly, the kind of cold that bit through layers and stung your lungs with each breath. My dog, Harper, a large shepherd mix, trotted ahead of me, her nose low to the ground, ears twitching at every frozen twig snap beneath our boots. The trail behind our cabin wrapped around a ridge and dipped toward the edge of the forest. Nothing particularly deep or ominous, just a line of skeletal trees marking the boundary between cleared land and untouched woods. I took that walk nearly every night since moving in after my divorce. It helped me sleep, helped me think. But that night, halfway down the trail, Harper stopped dead in her tracks, her head whipping around toward the tree line. Then I heard it. My own voice. Not just the words, "Come on, Harper!" but my exact voice. The same tone, the same breathy impatience I'd used just seconds earlier. Only I hadn't said it that time. It echoed from the woods, maybe 30 feet away, not loud, not whispered, but identical, as if someone had recorded me and played it back with a subtle delay. Harper lowered her head and growled, deep and low, the fur on her back rising in a stiff ridge. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, paralyzed, scanning the dark line of trees for any movement, any shape, anything that might explain what I just heard. But there was nothing. No rustling. No footprints in the thin crust of snow. Just that awful, sudden silence again. I turned around and we walked home fast, Harper sticking close to my leg the whole way. That night I barely slept, jolting awake every time the wind knocked a branch against the roof, convinced I'd hear myself again. The next night, I brought a flashlight and a heavy-duty whistle, just in case. We walked the same trail. I thought maybe there'd be a rational explanation, maybe it had been an echo, or some animal imitating me, though I knew deep down that didn't make sense. The forest didn't feel the same. The air was heavier. Charged. That time, about halfway down the trail, I noticed flickers of light between the trees. Like someone shining a flashlight erratically through the branches, but the color was off, too white, almost silvery, and the movements were unnatural, jittery, like the light kept skipping frames. Harper didn't growl this time. She whimpered, loud enough that I turned and knelt down, trying to comfort her. That's when I heard the second voice. It wasn't me this time. It was Harper. Not barking. Speaking. A perfect imitation of my voice, warped through her throat. "What are you scared of?" it said. The flashlight slipped from my hand and cracked against a rock. I scooped it up and ran, Harper trailing beside me, tail tucked. The mimicry wasn't just me anymore. Something was learning us. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, it's gotten worse. It started with small things. Footprints around the back door that didn't match mine or Harper's, left in the frost just before dawn. Lights flickering in the cabin even when I was sure they'd been turned off. The battery-powered clock on the kitchen wall skipping backward 5-10 seconds, then catching up again like nothing had happened. I stopped going outside at night. But 3 days ago, around 3 a.m., I heard something, pacing outside the cabin. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the snow, crunching in a circle around the walls, again and again. I sat there in the dark with a knife and my phone clutched to my chest, but no matter how fast I moved, by the time I reached any window, the sound had shifted to another wall. Like it was always just out of sight, but listening. Then last night broke something in me. I woke up to Harper barking, snarling at the back door. I grabbed the flashlight and ran to the kitchen, and there it was. Standing behind the frosted glass was me. Not someone who looked like me. Me. Wearing the same hoodie I had left folded on the kitchen chair. Smiling. And speaking. But the voice wasn't quite right, like a recording that had been copied too many times. Slightly delayed, slightly garbled, just enough to make your stomach twist. "You left the door unlocked," it said, perfectly mimicking the way I'd scolded myself earlier that day. "I can come in now." I slammed the deadbolt and dragged a chair against the handle. Harper was shaking, tail between her legs, refusing to go near the door. I didn't sleep. I waited for dawn, then packed our bags. We're staying with my brother now, in the city, where you can hear sirens and passing cars, and things don't echo the same way. But even here, something's off. I recorded myself reading a passage out loud this morning, just to test something, and when I played it back, there were 2 voices, one layered beneath mine, slightly out of sync, repeating every word in the exact same rhythm, but deeper. Hungrier. It wasn't a glitch. I don't know what it is. Maybe something old, something that lives in sound, that listens and repeats until it knows you better than you know yourself. Maybe it's not trying to hurt me. Maybe it's trying to become me. To take the place of the original by sounding more real. And now. It was the kind of night where every sound felt just a little too close. Cicadas buzzing like static in the trees, leaves rustling even though there wasn't a breeze, and the sky hung low with thick, unmoving clouds. We were 11, maybe 12, when it happened, though the memory has outlived every birthday since. I remember because it was the summer Micah and I still thought we were invincible. There was a forest behind our neighborhood, nothing special, just a strip of pine and oak that ran like a dark spine behind the row of houses. We called it the shortcut, because we used it to cut across to each other's places without taking the sidewalk like the rest of the world. It was ours, familiar, safe in that naive way things feel when you're a kid and the worst thing you've ever experienced is a scraped knee or a power outage. We had this game we played, pretending the forest had secrets. A witch's tree buried treasure. Sometimes we'd say we saw eyes between the branches just to scare each other. But that day, we didn't need to pretend. It was late afternoon, golden light slanting through the branches in thick, syrupy bands. Micah had dared me to race him to the old drainage pipe at the far edge, the one half covered in moss and spiderwebs. We were laughing, yelling, tripping over roots and each other, when we saw it, just standing there between the trees. At first, I thought it was a boar, maybe some stray dog. But it didn't move right. It stood too still. Its back was too long, like it had extra joints, and its legs bent backward in a way that made my stomach twist. It looked at us, I swear it looked, and though its face was shaped like a dog's, there was no curiosity or fear in its eyes. Just this blank, human-like stillness, as though it was waiting. Then it moved, not walked, not ran, just a smooth, gliding motion that brought it sideways behind a tree. No snapping twigs, no crunch of underbrush. It was there 1 second, gone the next, and the only sound was our breath catching in our throats. Micah swore he saw its mouth open, like it was trying to speak. We never told our parents. What were we supposed to say? Hey, we saw a broken animal ghost that stared through our skin. Instead, we avoided the forest for a week. But we were kids. Time and boredom do what they always do, and soon enough, we were cutting through again, pretending it hadn't happened. But something changed. At night I'd hear it. Not constantly, not at first. Just once or twice a month, and only after dark. A shuffling sound near the back fence, the occasional creak of branches bending under weight, like something heavy and careful was moving through. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like breathing, slow, wet, and close. I'd stare out the window, but there was never anything there. Just the darkness pressing against the glass. Years passed. Micah and I grew apart, drifted like all kids eventually do. He moved away for college, I stayed in state. But I never left that house, not really. Even after my parents sold it, and I rented a place downtown, it stayed in my head. And the noises never stopped. I'd wake up to tapping on the apartment window, on the 3rd floor. I'd find muddy paw prints on the balcony, just one or two, never a trail. I'd hear scratching at the door like something trying to remember how to knock. I kept telling myself it was nothing, a squirrel, a raccoon, the wind. But the feeling I got, deep in my chest when the sound started, that wasn't nothing. That was the same feeling I had when I saw it in the woods all those years ago. Like my bones remembered what my mind was trying to forget. Then, a month ago, Micah called. We hadn't spoken in years. He didn't say hello. Just, "Do you still hear it?" My heart dropped into my stomach. He'd moved 3 states away. Hadn't been back in over a decade. He told me he'd started waking up with scratches down his back, straight lines, like claws dragged with precision. He'd see trees outside his window, even though he lived in the middle of a city. And once, he woke up with soil in his bed. "I think it followed us," he whispered. Last night, I went back to the forest. It was colder than it should have been, and the trees didn't look right. The trail was still there, but it felt off, like the ground remembered more than it should. I stood by the drainage pipe for the first time in over a decade. I didn't say anything. I just listened. There was no wind. No insects. No distant hum of traffic. Just silence. Then, behind me, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I didn't turn. I didn't run. I just said, "Why?" And in that silence, something whispered, not words, just a sound that felt like understanding. Like it had been waiting for me to ask. I left without looking. I didn't need to. I finally understood something. It was never an animal. It wore the shape of one. But it wasn't made of flesh or blood or bone. It was something older. Something that found a crack between worlds and crawled through. And we, 2 kids playing games in the woods, were the first to see it. I don't think it ever left the forest. I think it is the forest. And I think it's still waiting.